Welcome back to the historic Exodus, Part 2. My name is Nathan Maggio, and again I'll be your guide today as we go through some of the evidence of the biggest miracles in the Bible. On our last episode, we covered looking at the traditional Mount Sinai site. We showed you the believed to be well of Moses in Midian, the caves of Jethro where Moses' father-in-law stayed. We went over the 10 plagues of Egypt and how the Pharaoh let the Israelites go. We went over the path that led them to the Red Sea where they would be hemmed down at Horeb Beach. We even went over the topography of the Red Sea crossing, some of the items left behind by the Egyptians, such as the chariot wheels, and the coral, and Solomon's pillar at Horeb Beach and across in Saudi Arabia as well. And we even looked at the melted sand from the pillar of fire of God. So these are all things that we looked at on the last episode. If you weren't with us, I encourage you to go back and start there. But on today's episode, we're going to continue forward to Mount Sinai. And before we begin, as always, let's pray first. Baruch atah Yehovah, Elohim Olechem Allah. Blessed are you, O Adonai, Yahweh, King of the universe, Maker of heaven and earth. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I pray today that I follow your will, that you forgive me for my sins when I speak wrong, that I can forgive others along the way. And please lead me away from the temptation of pride and of ego, and deliver me from the evil one, as always. In Yahweh and in Yeshua's name. Amen. Alright, so as I just kind of recapped, the Israelites are now across the Red Sea. They've now left behind about 250,000 Egyptian soldiers dead. And this is the scene that they would be looking at heading into the wilderness. Almost as if God had created a highway in the middle of the wilderness for them. It's pretty miraculous in itself. In Exodus 15:22-23, so Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the wilderness of Shur, and they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore the name of it was called Marah. And if we go back to our map, so you could see after they crossed Nueva Beach to Saudi Beach, they would have gone south through the wilderness of Sin for 3 days and eventually end at Marah. Now, in Exodus 15:24 and 25, the people got a bit frustrated and they began to murmur against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he had cast into the waters were made sweet, and he had made for them a statute and ordinance, and there he tested them. So Moses gives them water. Here's an older map with the word Marah on it, so we know this is the location. And in Exodus 15:26, and said, "If thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt do that which is right in his sight, and wilt give an ear to his commandments, and keep all of his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee." They had seen God, destroying about 250,000 people, and he wanted to assure them that he would not put any of these diseases upon his people that he had done to the Egyptians. So he made a covenant with them, saying, "Look, if you keep the commandments, I will not do any of those things that I did to the Egyptians upon you." In Exodus 15:27, and they came to camp in Elim, where there were 12 wells of water, and 70 or 70 palm trees, and they encamped here by the waters. To this very day, there are still the same 12 wells and and approximately 70 some palm trees. Okay, so if you in the video, he does like a bird's eye view to show you all the wells. And this is where Elim is, south of Marah. And after they got water here, and this is just amazing that, they were able to, out of nowhere, have this amazing provision. So the Israelites get water at Elim in Numbers 33:9-10. And they removed from Marah and came up to Elim. In Elim there were 12 fountains of water and 70 palm trees, and they pitched there. And they removed from Elim and encamped by the Red Sea. So once they left Elim, we think that they went down south here to Magna Oasis, encamped by the Red Sea. This would be the most likely area where you could go with 3 million people. Now remember, Mount Sinai is over here, but God knows that the Israelites are going to wander around the desert for 40 years anyway. Alright, so that he doesn't care how long it takes them to get there. Originally, he's doing it his way. So when the Israelites traveled south to the Magna Oasis, it's very interesting because when you go there today, the locals still call one of the springs the Spring of Moses. Alright, and there would have been the ability for the Israelites to gather fish here, food, water, really regroup at this point. And so now after they regroup and camp there for a few days, I believe, they're going to go north now through the wilderness of Sin. In Numbers 33:11, and they removed from the Red Sea and encamped in the wilderness of Sin. Now this is what the wilderness of Sin looks like today. Not a very inviting place. So you could imagine the Israelites start to get a little bit frustrated again with Moses. In Exodus 16:1-3, and they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came unto the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month, after their departing out of the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, Would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, and when we did eat bread to the full. For ye have brought us forth into this wilderness, to kill this whole assembly with hunger. So they look around. They realize there is no food here, and it's going to become a real big problem pretty shortly for about 3 million people. So they're wandering through the wilderness of Sin. They're following Moses and Aaron. They're murmuring, and they arrive at a place called Rephidim. Now Exodus 17:1. And all the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. Now here's where it gets really interesting. So at Rephidim, there is a huge split rock. And in this part of the story, Exodus 17:3, and the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses and said, Why is it that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our cattle with thirst? Exodus 17:4, and Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, What shall I do unto this people? They almost be ready to stone me. And isn't it interesting that there's stones all around this area that they could have used to stone them? You can see how big this rock is with the person standing next to it. There's actually another person in the middle of the gap. But in Exodus 17:6, Behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. So notice in this verse, God tells Moses about the rock of Horeb, almost as if he's giving him directions before he gets there, saying, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb. Well, how could there be a rock in Horeb if there's millions of rocks laying all over the ground? If you said, I'll meet you at the St. Louis Ark, then everyone knows where that would be, because it's a very unique landmark. So the rock of Horeb was a landmark. It was a huge rock that had been probably sitting there for many years, ever since the beginning of time, waiting for this story to occur, for God's planning. And so that's how we know it wasn't just small rock on the ground. It had to be something that was recognizable for Moses to go up and strike it and know what God wanted him to do. So this is a little bit of a recreation by Ryan Marah's discoveredsinai.com. What's interesting about this rock is that below the rock and through the areas leading up to the crack in the rock, there is a ton of water erosion. And you can see here on the right picture all the rocks that are smoothed over from the water, and the rocks that have not touched the water, that would be above where the water would land, are not smooth. So this isn't wind erosion, this is water erosion that we see here, which makes complete sense for the biblical account. In Isaiah 48:21, and they thirsted not when he led them through the deserts. He caused the waters to flow out of the rock for them. He clave the rock also, and the waters gushed out. And remember, this had to be a huge amount of water in order to take care of 3 million people. It couldn't be a little spring where everyone has to wait in line to go up to get their own water. Otherwise you would die waiting in line. The water had to come to all the people, so it gushed out and it created a brook below the rock that led to all the people so that they could get hydrated. This rock is a massive rock. Unbelievable miracle. Psalm 78:15-16 says, He split the rocks in the wilderness and gave them drink as out of the great depths. He brought streams also out of the rock and caused waters to run down like rivers. And I'm going to take this time to pause for a moment and show you guys the video. I think that the pictures just don't really do this rock justice. So let's take a look at the actual video by Ryan Marah, and then we'll resume.
Is it possible that this split rock still remains today, testifying to the accuracy of this story? The answer is yes, and it is stunning. This split rock was first discovered by Jim and Penny Caldwell, an American couple that was working in Saudi Arabia in the early 1990s. The local Bedouins have long had two names for this area, the Water of Moses and the Split Rock of Moses. This split rock is on top of a 100-foot hill and is somewhere between 40 and 60 feet high. And what's really amazing about this specific location in the valley along the possible route to Mount Sinai is that the rocks underneath the split rock are smooth, as if tons and tons of water poured forth, forming a miniature lake at the bottom for the Israelites to drink from. If you have a relationship with a local, they'll tell you that this area is related to Moses, but the Bedouins that live here will try to keep you out. We saw this firsthand as we were chased out of the area. Okay, so we are flooring it. We're gonna see if this guy follows us. We heard 2 gunshots. This guy's like, doesn't really want to party.
And part of the reason why this has been hidden for so long is because the locals decided to do that. And he talks about that here as well.
Group, and he even had meetings with Pakistani intelligence and close associates of Osama bin Laden. And now he's speaking out for the first time.
When I was in the jihad world, we all knew that the Mount Sinai was in Saudi Arabia. The people on the outside, even most Muslims, had no idea that it was there because we fighters didn't want anyone to know about it. We all knew that the Saudi government hid it and protected it with security, and we all agreed with it. We believe that if a site, even a holy site, is visited by people and used for idolatry, it should be destroyed. But our hiding it, according to the Islamic law, is what saved it, so you can see it today and appreciate it.
Very interesting. So The rock of Horeb is just north of Mount Sinai, and the Amalekite region is not super far from there, okay? And the Amalekites came from Esau, from the bloodline of Esau, if you remember the story of the porridge and Jacob stealing Esau's inheritance. Well, Esau would eventually, the bloodline would be creating the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites were not very big fans of the Israelites. And in Exodus 17, 8 and 9, then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, Choose us out men, and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. Genesis 27:41. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of the mourning for my father are at hand, then I will slay my brother Jacob. So this feud between, Jacob obviously would birth Israel, and the Amalekites, which would come from Esau, this feud was still very fresh. Exodus 17, 11 through 13. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed, and when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy, and they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, and one on the other side, and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of his sword. In Exodus 17:14, And the Lord said unto Moses, Write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua, for I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And they built an altar for this victory. They named the altar Jehovah Nissi. Exodus 17:15 through 16. And Moses built an altar, and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. For he said, Because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Now in this area we find Hebrew inscriptions on the stones. It is not an area where Hebrew would be located for any reason, unless there was some type of event happening. But in this stone here it says place of rest, which is the same thing. And Ryan Marah, who I keep talking about, who traveled to Mount Sinai recently, who produced that amazing documentary called Finding the Mountain of Moses, the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, he says that Rephidim means place of rest. And we find this in the inscription on the stones in this area. Now remember, the Hebrew language is not used in Arabia, showing that the Israelites must have been there for Hebrew to exist. This Hebrew, I know it's hard to make out, especially if you don't speak Hebrew, but the literal meaning means died Amalekite. Here is some more Hebrew writing on rocks. There's Yah provides a ram in Hebrew on this rock, so they were just scribbling everywhere they went. And you can see here in this image, they actually wrote down the sole of the foot on this rock and outlined another foot here. Deuteronomy 11:24. Every place whereon the soles of your feet shall tread shall be yours, from the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river and the river Euphrates, even to the utmost sea shall your coast be. So the Israelites took this literally, and they started to inscribe their images of their feet everywhere they went, almost as if you're planting a flag in the ground to claim that land yours. So through this whole area we see these foot images. The Israelites also like to shape their campsites in the shape of a foot or a sandal. Pastor Mike Todd did a great documentary about 7 campsites surrounding Jerusalem that they have found that have been shaped like a foot or a sandal. Here's more examples of Israelite camps that they still found the wall left over. This This is in one of the ones called Gilgal. It's one of the most prevalent ones that look like a foot. And remember, Rephidim is north of Mount Sinai, so as they get water at the rock of Rephidim, they battle the Amalekites. They are now headed down south to Mount Sinai. So in Exodus 18, 2 through 5, then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back, and her 2 sons, of which the name of the one was Gershom, for he said, I have been an alien in a strange land, and the name of the other was Eliezer, for the God of my father said he was mine help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses into the wilderness, where he encamped at the mount of God. So Moses gets his family all together. Now we're ready to rock. So this is the area where the Israelites would have camped below the mountain. It is a huge, huge area with plenty of room. The temperatures year-round would have provided great temperatures for them to be able to raise their cattle and to let their sheep flock in the pastures. And when you look at this from above, Mount Sinai would be to the left here. There's another range of mountains that encompasses them around the Mount Sinai area, where they would have had to have gone through these little, pathways through the mountains to get into this big opening. So it creates a natural amphitheater. Okay, it creates a natural way for the people to be able to listen to Moses. This is the center of that area. For whatever reason, when this picture was taken, there was only one tree left in that whole area. It was right in the dead center. I thought that was interesting. Now, here's another find. There is a part in the Bible where Moses is told that if anyone should go up the mountain, that he is to shoot them or stone them. Exodus 19:12. And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed yourselves, that ye go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. For whoever toucheth the mount shall surely be put to death. So here we have these marker warnings, like signs, they were found about halfway up the mountain. There's more of them. Okay. Exodus 19:13. There shall not a hand touch it, but he surely shall be stoned or shot through. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. Stoned or shot through. So, Exodus 19:18. And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire. And the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. Exodus 19:18 through 20. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long, and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on top of the mount, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mount, and Moses went up. And again, these pictures just don't do this scene justice, so they actually recreated an augmented reality scene using the actual Mount Sinai land and imposing the graphics of this event. So let's take a look at that video real quickly now.
Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. Alone Moses climbed the steep and jagged rocks of Mount Sinai, placing his feet in steps made without hands. And far up on those solitary heights, he drew near to the cloud that marked the place of God's presence. And it came to pass on the 3rd day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. When the voice of the trumpet sounded long and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice.
I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me, and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant.
So here we see there is a perfect speaking platform from the mountain, right in front of the Mount Sinai area. And this here is Mount Sinai itself. Now, as you can see, the top of it is still burnt from the fire of God. And when you look at these rocks, they're not burnt on the bottom, they're only burnt on the outer area. We'll show you that in a moment. Now Moses speaks the 10 Commandments to the Israelites, probably from that speaking platform that I just showed you. 10 Commandments were, thou shalt not have no other gods before me, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or bow down to serve them, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, you shall remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, honor thy father and mother, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, and thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, wife, or property. Now, this image is not real, but it is kind of a remake of what it might have looked like. Exodus 20:18. And all the people saw the thunderings and lightnings, and the noise of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood far off. So here's a better picture of the rock, and you can see right where the line is, where the burning stops. You can see whenever you chip the rock, it's not burnt on the inside. It is not a volcanic rock of any sort. It is actually more of a clay-based rock or a redstone type of look underneath. Now, Andrew Jones, the top of these mountains are dark, showing signs of burnt marks. The outer color of these rocks are black and the insides are brown. This seems to be more evidence that this mountain and the surrounding mountains nearby were covered with fire and smoke. Okay, so here is the flat plateau, and in order to fit all the parts of the Bible, there has to be, there's a story that it has to go along with it. So in Exodus 24:1-2, and he said unto Moses, Come up unto the Lord thou, and Aaron and Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship ye afar off. And Moses alone shall come near the Lord, and neither shall the people go up with him. So the 70 elders have to stay at this flat plateau halfway up the mountain and wait for Moses. And so here we are, we're looking at the flat plateau, the speaking platform, Mount Sinai even up higher, and then below there, down at the bottom, is the altar of Moses, which we're going to go over here in a moment. So, when Moses comes down with the 10 Commandments, he gets pretty upset seeing that they have created a golden calf, and he destroys the commandments, ends up, killing about 3,000 of the Israelites that were worshiping the false gods. And for the rest of the Israelites, he makes them all start sacrificing some of their livestock as a repentance. And he creates a covenant, a blood covenant, at this time. So there has to be a altar someplace where they were able to do this. Now, this altar still stands to this very day. It used to be in better shape. But you can see here that there was a stream right next to it to wash the blood from the sacrifices. There was a turn in the altar so that the animals would be standing here. They wouldn't see where they were heading when they were standing in line. And then here's the actual altar where the sacrificing would have been occurred. Moses would have been standing here. In Exodus 20:23, ye shall not make with me gods of silver, neither shall you make unto yourself gods of gold. But instead, Exodus 20:24, an altar of the earth you shall make for me, and shalt sacrifice thy burnt offerings and thy peace offerings, thy sheep, thine oxen, in all the places where I record my name. I will come unto thee, and I will bless thee. And so Moses creates this altar, and he gets 12 memorial stones. He created 12 pillars, one for each of the tribe of Israel. Now, to this very day, you can still see those pillars, and they are in much better shape as well. But this is really kind of a drawing of what it would look like in its full form. In Exodus 24:25, and thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone, for if thou lifted up thy tool upon it, thou hast polluted it. So all these stones had to be found perfectly from the hand of God. They couldn't use any tools to make this. So here are the leftover pillars from the tribes, the 12 tribes. You can see they're definitely different from the other stones. Exodus 24:4, and Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and rose up early in the morning, and builded an altar under the hill, and the 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Here's another picture of it. Exodus 24:5, and he sent young men of the children of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto the Lord. Exodus 31:18, and he gave unto Moses, when he had made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone, written with the finger of God. Okay, next we're going to show you the golden calf altar. And in Exodus 32:1-3, and when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron, and said unto him, Up, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we know not what has become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me. And all the people brake off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and brought them unto Aaron. Exodus 32:4-5. And he received them at their hand, and fashioned it with a graving tool, after he had made it a molten calf. And they said, These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation, and said, Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord. So here are some more drawings at the golden calf altar site. And you can see this is an Egyptian god, very similar to the worship of Ra, with the sun in the middle of its horns. Exodus 32-7. And the Lord said unto Moses, Go, get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. So Now you've got Moses coming down the mountain like an upset parent. More drawings at the golden calf altar. You can see the drawings of them dancing. And this type of worship involved promiscuous dancing as well. Exodus 32:9. And the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. So he's telling Moses, I'll consume and destroy these Israelites, and then through you I will make a great nation. Moses is like, wait a minute, you want to start all over again? Didn't we just go through a lot of work to get these people out to Mount Sinai? Here's another side of the golden calf. These images are all around this huge, this altar is huge, this golden calf altar. Exodus 32:11. And Moses besought the Lord his God, and said, Lord, why doth thy wrath wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? So Moses is saying exactly that, saying, why are you going to destroy these people? You just did all these amazing miracles to save them. Why even save them to begin with if you knew you were going to do that? Here's another side of it, and you can just see how massive this altar site is. Exodus 32:13 through 14. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, thy servants, to whom thou swarest by thine own self, and said unto them, I will multiply your seed as the stars of heaven, and all this land that I have spoken of I will give your seed, and thou shalt inherit it forever. And the Lord repented of the evil which he had thought to do unto his people. So Moses did a pretty good job creating his case, being able to kind of talk the God of the universe into doing a different decision. It's pretty powerful. But now Moses comes down and he breaks the 10 Commandments because he is so upset. In Exodus 32:15-16, and Moses turned and went down from the mount, and the 2 tables of the testimony were in his hand, and the tables were written on both their sides. On the one side and on the other they were written. And the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, graven upon the tables. Exodus 32:19. And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh to the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands, and brake them beneath the mount. Exodus 32:20. And he took the calf which they had made, and burnt it in the fire, and ground it to powder, and strawed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel drink of it. So, amazingly enough, on top of this golden calf altar, there is a place that looks to be that there was something that was ground into the stone. And I don't think I mentioned it before, but you can see in this picture that the Saudis have this all fenced off as a site, an archaeological site. And there happens to be a brook right next to it, because remember, in order for this story to work, there had to be water nearby, because Moses didn't want this gold to just go buried into the ground, because these Israelites would have went and gone searching for it. So in order to get rid of it, he has to make them drink it. So that way, if they want that gold that bad, they're going to have to go through their feces in order to get the gold. Alright, so he's grinding it up, he's throwing it in the water, and he's making them drink it as a punishment. So, surprisingly enough, there is a dried up lake bed right next to this golden calf altar. Exodus 32:26. Then Moses stood in the gate of the camp and said, Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together unto him. In Exodus 32:27. And he said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from the gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor. So they end up slaying about 3,000 Israelites this day. And so, surprisingly enough, not far from the golden calf altar is a mass graveyard, which we just showed you one of the gravestones there. In Exodus 32:28, and the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men. Now, another thing that has to be prevalent at this site in order for it to fit the biblical account is that it says at the Mount Sinai that there was a cave of Elijah. So Elijah was a prophet in the Old Testament. And in 1 Kings 18:38, Elijah has a contest with the prophets of Baal. And they put two altars, one for the prophets of Baal and one for Elijah. Elijah pours water all over the altar, and the other prophets of Baal cannot get theirs to be lit by their God, and Elijah's is consumed by fire by the Lord of Yahweh. And it says here in Kings 18:38, then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice and the wood and the stones and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. So where that happened is Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel is about a 7-hour, 12-minute drive to Mount Sinai. This would be somewhat of a pretty long trip on foot, which is exactly what Elijah describes. But it would be possible. And in 1 Kings 19:7-8, and the angel of the Lord came again the second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee. And he arose and did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto the Horeb, the mount of God. So 40 days and 40 nights would make sense for this travel. And it was as it says here, the journey is too great for thee. It was probably too great for a single man being chased by one of the most powerful queen. I think she was a queen, one of the most powerful women in the area, and wanted to kill him. Now, at Mount Sinai, there is a cave that people call Elijah's Cave. The locals call it Elijah's Cave, and in 1 Kings 19:9, and he came thither unto a cave and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said unto him, what dost thou here, Elijah? And this cave is fairly massive. Now it looks out towards the land where the Israelites would have camped, and it's amazing how these things all just happen to fit in place. So let's take a look at it again. So here is the altar of Moses we showed you. Here's the stream, the lake bed, and the wells. And then we have the speaking platform, the cave of Elijah just to the right of it, and then the burnt part of Mount Sinai up top. Oh, and the golden calf is all the way down. Okay, and this is a very interesting picture as well, because in Mount Sinai, this was also found, and it is one of the earliest menorahs to ever be found inscribed on a rock or anywhere. And it's a menorah because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whereas a Chanukah is about 8 candles. That's the one used for Hanukkah. The menorah is the one that was put into the tabernacle with the showbread and the altar of incense, and obviously the Ark of the Covenant. So here's the tabernacle layout. And the tabernacle was also built at Mount Sinai about a year after they'd been camping there. And we're going to go into, this may have been where the tabernacle would have been able to be placed, okay? Because they had to do it in such a pattern that the tribes lined up in the shape of a cross. So let's take a look at a video of where all of this gold, because the tabernacle was made with gold stakes, it had a bunch of gold cups in it, it had all sorts of different golden items in the tabernacle. So in order for them to make the tabernacle here, there must be some evidence of some type of a metal shop, a place where they were using furnaces to heat gold. We're going to take a look at a video that I just found that it's pretty recent.
But then as we got into it, we saw more and we realized it wasn't a hunting lair. It wasn't a grave site. This is a furnace. It's about 15 feet in diameter. It's about 5 feet tall. It's hollow on the inside, and those stones are precisely laid to regulate the oxygen and the temperature, because to melt gold and silver, you can't just do it with a regular fire. You have to increase the temperature to about 1948 degrees for gold. And so to do that, you have to regulate your environment, your heating environment, so the fire stays at a temperature. And this is a perfect setup to regulate the oxygen, to make sure the temperature stays constant so they can melt these metals.
So it's really interesting that they're discovering more evidence in this area that just fits with the biblical account. He'll show you some of the molds here. Let's see if I can.
So you look at the picture of that and how it looks, and right here is a picture of a form in Armenia. And Mary now remembered this and gave this to me, and you can see it looks almost identical, except the one at Sinai is much more complicated because Bezalel was given the divine wisdom to build. To a ceramic container that's precise, and they pour the gold into that. They put the ceramic container right in there as a holder, because nobody wants to hold that. Let it cool, they take it out, they chip away the ceramic, and there's a beautiful pomegranate. This is how they did these things. You know, they were much, much more. They poured the wing of the cherubim of the Ark of the Covenant right here. Wow. That's that stone form. That is a form to make a hammered work. It's not a pour like you pour in a cup like the first form and it cools. You take a piece of gold that's poured in a box, basically, in a rectangular box, and then while it's cooling, sort of like making a sword, like the blacksmith makes a sword, he's got it in the general shape, and then he beats on it and he hammers it until it looks exactly like a sword while it's still cooling. The same thing with this plate of gold. They would take this plate of gold while it was not cold yet, it was not fully formed, while it was cooling, and they would place it right over this form, and they start hammering on it, beating on it gently, precisely, until it turned into the wing of the cherub of the Ark of the Covenant.
And it's just so amazing that they continue to keep finding things like this that continue to confirm that this is the true location of Mount Sinai. And I'm going to end with a video by Ryan Marah, who, again, I got a lot of my research from for this presentation. But it basically sums up what we looked at today, and I think it will be a great way to summarize what I presented to you today.
Why haven't we heard about this other candidate for Mount Sinai? Why has almost the entire focus been on the traditional site despite its lack of compelling evidence? Think about how many things line up with the biblical story right here at this mountain. There's a beach and path where the Red Sea crossing could have happened, matching the biblical account. You can see how the Israelites could have camped near Elim with its 12 wells and 70 palms. Along the way to Jabal Makla, there's a split rock and area suitable for camping. There's a mountain referred to as the Mountain of Moses, with a large plain in front of it where millions of Israelites could have camped. You can see an altar of uncut stone at the foot of the mountain, where there's evidence of burnt sacrifices, right where it should be. There's evidence of bull worship, and you can see exactly how Moses would have seen the golden calf worship going on as he came down from the mountain. There's a brook that comes down from the mountain just like the Exodus story says. You can see right where the cave of Elijah might have been. All of these little details have to fit, and they fit.
Wow, so again, another powerful video. I want to thank you all for watching today. This is going to conclude our presentation and the evidence that I presented today. I hope that it will encourage your faith, it will strengthen your faith, because we all tend to doubt. Even the best Christians will on some days wonder if what they're reading and believing, if there could be a way that it might not be true. And when that doubt creeps in, try to remember the story of the Exodus and the miraculous evidence that's been left behind to prove that it was not just a story, that it was a historical account that God passed down through all the generations. And this story was supposed to show God's love for his people. A lot of times we think, why doesn't God step in and do something? Well, he has. You can read about it in the Bible many times. But this is one of my favorite stories, and I encourage you to do your own research. All the research that I've presented before you, most of the credits are at the bottom of each screen, of each presentation slide. But just to give you some background, 3 of the main sources. One was Ryan Morrow, who I showed you a couple of his videos. I believe his website is still SinaiInSaudiArabia.com, and he also is a part of the DoubtingThomasFoundation.org, and they are trying to save this and preserve this site. Since they discovered all this stuff, Saudi Arabia has allowed tours to begin, so you can actually visit these sites now. And another great researcher is Pastor Mike Todd Fink. He runs a YouTube channel and a website called www.holylandsite.com. He's also very, very accurate and thorough, so I would really encourage checking out not only his Mount Sinai research, but all the other Holy Land sites that he's visited. And then obviously a special thank you to Ron Wyatt, one of the pioneers of a lot of the discoveries of the Holy Land. And again, my name is Nathan Maggio. I thank you for joining us today for this adventure. Let's pray one last time, and then we'll be signing off. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us all of your word and all of the evidence that we have, so that we do not have to believe in blind faith. Thank you for being a God that cares about us, that would do so much to even come down and save your people from slavery, and to have a plan, not only for this story, but for your Son's plan to come and save us, and ultimately to sacrifice his life so that we can live in eternity with you. I want to thank you for giving me the ability to do this. I pray that the people that watch this can be nourished by the information, and that you will begin to just spread your joy in their life. I thank you for everything in Yahweh's power and in Yeshua's name. Amen. Thank you, everyone. God bless.